and welcome to World Talks here on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. Today we're joined by Vladimír Bilčík. He's a former Slovakian MEP with the European People's Party, to unpack the evolving dynamics between the EU and the Western Balkans, from Serbian President Vucic's visit to Paris to rising tensions in Bosnia amid EU warnings, and Poland's EU Council presidency. We'll explore how these events fit into Europe's geopolitical puzzle and what the EU must do to uphold peace, unity and its enlargement ambitions in the Balkans. Welcome, sir, to TVP World, and thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Very happy to be here.
Pleasure. So let's start with President Vucic's visit to Paris. Tell me what you make of it.
Well, I think it's a sign of a very long-standing personal relationship that President Vucic has built with President Macron. They agreed to meet some days ago, a couple of weeks ago, I believe, and I think it is extremely important that President Macron has reached out to President Vucic and has asked him to come to Paris for a very open talk. They had lunch together, and I understand from what we have already been able to read and got relayed as the news from Paris. They've covered a range of issues, covering Serbia's European path, covering bilateral cooperation, covering, of course, important investments by France, including strategic issues such as the purchase of the Rafale fighter aircraft. They also covered Ukraine and France's role when it comes to future peace arrangements, all these issues. So I think, in a sense, if I can put it very simply in a nutshell, there is clearly Macron's strategic interest in having this dialogue with Serbia, with President Vucic, and there is a strategic understanding that despite a number of issues which have to be resolved, it is in Europe's and France's interest to help move Serbia on its European path and, of course, European integration and closer to Europe, especially in this time when there are so many uncertainties, when the US is
Mr. Bilčík,
pulling out.
That's all well and good, but, Serbia has been on the path to the EU for years now, and it's not moving particularly quickly. And now perhaps is not the best time for President Macron to be holding out an invitation, is it, with everything that's going on in Serbia, with, allegations of corruption in government and especially focused at President Vucic. I mean, diplomatically speaking, the optics don't look good, do they?
Well, I take your point. At the same time, the Western Balkans as a whole, as a region, has not been moving towards the European Union for the past 20, 25 years. We made this promise that we would enlarge the Western Balkans 25 years ago. And that promise has become largely unfulfilled. Apart from Croatia, really there has not been any other country moving at a fast speed towards the European Union. And there are difficult issues from the past, especially from the wars of the 1990s. The dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina is one of those issues. And I agree, the optics are difficult. There have been large-scale protests across Serbia for the past 4 months. President Vucic himself made it very publicly, we've got the message. The government has resigned, the prime minister has resigned. There will be a new government in Serbia. So there are ongoing processes domestically. And I think that President Macron has issued this invitation to have a very frank conversation in Paris.
Yes, but, sir, if I may interrupt you, you mentioned the appointment of a new government. We've got a completely inexperienced politician as the new Prime Minister, Mr. Đuro Makut. He's a medical professor, if I understand correctly, and he doesn't seem to have calmed the protests down, does he? They're after Vucic.
Well, look, the protests are there because of what happened in Novi Sad on the 1st of November. And there are, at the moment, 6 demands that the protesters have. And these demands have very much to do with what has been happening since the 1st of November, namely the collapse of the canopy at the train station, which led up to the death of 16 people. An enormous tragedy. And I think this needs to be investigated as soon as possible. Justice has to be served. The public has been outraged. And the other demands have to do with what has been happening since the 1st of November, including, of course, arrests of students, including attacks against students, all of these things. And I think it is important that these issues are addressed, that they are investigated. Of course, this new government, I think, needs to focus on giving answers to the public. And we don't know yet what the public mood is going to be like in the next week or two, or in a month or two, whether this is going to calm the situation down. But that is one of the political outcomes. The government has fallen. These protests have disturbed politics, but they haven't changed fundamentally the power of gravity and the center of power in politics. President Vucic's mandate lasts until 27. He's an elected president. And I think it is important to have dialogue. Despite what is happening in the country, it is important to maintain this open door of communication. And it is important to do this, especially right now, because if it doesn't happen, China and Russia will move in. So Europe has to move in as well, even though there may be topics on the table where there may be also disagreements, there may be difficult issues, but we need to engage and talk about these issues. And I think Presidents Macron and Vucic, they have established a personal relationship, and it is easier in this personal context also to talk about issues where you may disagree or see things differently. So I think in that sense, that trip to Paris and that visit to Paris is a good sign of engagement. Let's see what happens next.
Understood. Thank you. I'd like to move on now to Bosnia. There's a bit of a crisis there as well, sparked by Milorad Dodik, the head of the Bosnian Serb region. How do you see the situation there? How dramatic, stable is it?
Well, look, we have an ongoing set of crises across the Western Balkans, unresolved issues from the past, difficult regional issues. I've already mentioned the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. And of course, we have a difficult, fragile situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina. I think this is where the EU has to be engaged a lot more. It is good that the High Representative Kaja Kallas is in the region. And I think we have to take the situation seriously because of also the wider international context. Unfortunately, the United States seems to be pulling out of a number of places in international relations. And I suspect its role in the Western Balkans may not be as present as in the past. This is why it is important that the EU is engaged. And of course, we cannot afford another blowing crisis in our neighborhood. So I see the situation as a serious one. At the same time, I do believe that the European Union and the Europeans more broadly, including with our partners in the neighborhood, and here I think Serbia can play an important role, an important stabilizing role in the region. I think that issue of Bosnia and Herzegovina and regional issues was probably also on the agenda of the talks between President Vučić and President Macron. It is important that the key principles are maintained, that the territorial integrity of the countries in the region, including Bosnia and Herzegovina, are maintained.
Well, you mentioned...
I think we need to pay attention to this. This is also an important task for the Polish EU Council presidency, by the way.
Indeed. I'll come to the Polish presidency in just a second, but Kaja Kallas are called exactly for the territorial integrity of Bosnia. How do you think that could be achieved? In other words, how do we heal the rift that seems to be building at the moment?
I think we engage all sides, we listen to them, and we take all the steps gradually but painstakingly towards making the common institutions and the public institutions at large in Bosnia and Herzegovina work. The country's institutions, public institutions, are not working properly. They haven't been working properly. And I think the only way forward is to really engage in a fair dialogue with everyone to make sure that those institutions do begin to work, begin to deliver.
What about the role?
Bosnia and Herzegovina, let me just finish one sentence.
Yes, please do.
We've offered to Bosnia and Herzegovina the path to the European Union, the candidate status. Bosnia can move on its EU path, and I think this is one of the carrots that should be picked up and used in the dialogue.
Absolutely. I was just going to ask about the EU. What is the role that EU institutions can play, in particular under the Polish presidency of the EU Council at the moment, to, again, bring Bosnia back on track to membership of the EU?
I think not just Bosnia, the whole region. We need to get serious about enlargement. I know this may not be the number one priority at the moment. Europe's looking inward. Europe is looking at defense. Europe is looking at security issues. But I think enlargement precisely is the one area where we can focus on enhancing our security. If we have a secure, more stable, predictable, and trustworthy neighborhood, which gradually becomes integrated with the rest of the EU, we all become stronger as a union, we all become more secure, and we are able to defend ourselves better. So let's look at enlargement as a strategic priority towards all candidate countries in the region, and let's move in all areas where we can move at the moment. Some may be easier, such as economic aspects, security aspects. Some may be more difficult in terms of resolving some thorny issues from the past, in terms of addressing the problems of rule of law and democracy. But let's just move in the direction of enlargement. Let's deliver some progress and results. And I think that may also make the engagement by our partners in the region more genuine and more committed. I think that's the only way forward.
Understood. Well, certainly very dynamic. And thank you very much for explaining all of the different pieces of the puzzle to our audience, Mr. Bilčík, and have a good day, sir.
Thank you very much. Greetings to everyone in Poland.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
And that's all from us in this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.